Welcome back everyone. Today I'm going to show you how I draw my manga panels, basically rendering in black and white. This is a lot different from what I used from my other colored paintings, with a few similarities here and there. This technique is still a work in progress, but I think it's good enough to show it off. And maybe a year from now, I might do the same thing and see the difference between where I take this style by then. But first, let me thank everybody for 450 subscribers. I'm really happy with that number. I know this is a far cry for the larger picture of YouTube, but I don't take it for granted at all. Thank you everyone for clicking that subscribe button and liking this video, and let's just get into it. Okay, I know, this is the most generic anime face, but I just want to keep it simple for now. Once I've drawn the overall shape, I would start with the eyes. My first tip is to draw with a hard round pressure brush so we get really fine lines like this. See how it tapers off from end to end? The goal is to mimic how I would traditionally draw with a pen. Next is drawing the upper part of the eye with really thick lines that stacks together like this. While the bottom part of the eye is a lot thinner. To me, it just looks aesthetically pleasing to have that contrast. Right now, I'm drawing the eye that's in the farther side of the face, and because it's at an angle, it's a little bit distorted. Remember that the eye is actually a ball, so when it's drawn in an angle, it's gonna want to squeeze itself and make this shape. I'm also drawing the upper part of the iris with a really thick line here. This is because of the shadow caused by the space between the eyeball and the eyelid. And of course, don't forget about the eyelashes. Once the eye is fully drawn, I'm going to use an even thinner brush size of only 3 pixels, and I'm going to shade it as if I'm drawing with a pencil. Painstaking? Absolutely. Is it fun? Probably not even that. Is it worth it? You bet. Just go at it like your life depends on it, okay? And if you want to shade a darker color, just change the angle and crosshatch like this. And eventually, you'll end up with something like this. Now that it's properly shaded, the next part is to add details like the glare. Take your eraser tool and erase a circle on one side of the eye. I also like to add another smaller circle underneath that too. And voila! I could always just take a white color and paint a white dot on there, but I want to do it the mangaka way. No, I'm not talking about the hard way. I'm talking about the painstakingly difficult way. A few more flourishes and I think we got something special here. Shout out to the artist FerMiranda365 on Instagram. I actually got this idea from him, and I just took his style and made it into something of my own. With the same principles, let's now do the other eye. That is just how I render it. I didn't come up with this technique on my own too. Over the years, I've seen and have been taught by other artists on how they do it, and I just turned their teachings into something on my own. Next, let's render the face. But first, we need to determine where the light source is going to be. If we can figure that out, we can also determine where the shadow is going to lie on the face. Using the same technique, just apply hatching lines to where the shadow would be, and we're going to be using a smaller brush size once again to render the shaded part of the face. The face has a lot of complicated shapes, tons of contouring angles and rounded areas that makes no sense to the uninitiated. I'll be honest, I'm not really the best out there when it comes to understanding the structure of the face. But here's my secret. I just try and remember the important landmarks, parts of the face where it's going to cast the shadow when the light is in a certain way. Here are some important ones that you want to keep in mind, and some of these might be very obvious. First one is underneath the hair. Don't forget about those little strands that will cast the shadow too. Above the eye or in between the eyebrow and eyelid. Underneath the eye, there's a gap between the actual eye and the cheekbones that looks like this. This part is either going to capture light or cast the shadow depending on the light source. And of course, underneath the nose and above the lips. The nose bridge will cast the shadow too, but sometimes that shadow is going to be interrupted by the angle of that cheekbone we were just talking about. And just like before, it's either going to capture light or cast the shadow. Everything that I told you can also be applied when you're trying to render in color. If you notice, I also colored the character with a gray. This is another example on how you can render it in black and white. But we're mangakas, we like to make things more difficult for ourselves. Okay, next, let's move on to the hair. If the character has black hair, it can be very difficult to see it when you have a black background too. But there are ways to mitigate this. For example, manga artists use a type of texture to relieve the black ink around the character, making them stand out even more. For me, I'll just use a gradient and then paint over it with a textured brush like this to get the same effect. Or, my favorite method is to render the light around the hair instead. This creates a more subtle implied effect like this. This way, I don't need to edit any backgrounds to make the hair look obvious. Remember that rendering shapes is all about implications. You don't need to explicitly draw something to make it obvious. Sometimes you just need to imply that it's there. And if your line work and understanding of the world is strong enough, the outcome of your shading should be very clear to what you're trying to communicate to your audience. What I'm doing here is just applying hatching lines in the same direction of the flow of the hair to imply its shape. And just like the eyes in the face, I'm drawing this with a very small brush size, but this time with white. But we're not done yet. I'm going to add strands on the outside of the hair too. These are just smaller strokes to imply some sort of imperfection around the hair. This is one of my favorite part of the process because it's such a small thing to do, but it has a massive impact once everything is said and done. See this? This is without strands, and this is with strands. Big difference. If the panel has a white background, just change the strands to a more obvious color like black. And that should be it. What do y'all think? I hope that was somewhat helpful for you all. I know I skipped a lot of the drawing process, especially at the beginning, but this is more about the rendering rather than drawing the entire thing. By the way, right now, I'm reading Witch Hat Atelier, and I think that manga is going to have a big impact on how I'm going to draw from here on. Such an amazing book with eye-gasmic art style. Anyways, like and subscribe if you like this video, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, everyone! Bye-bye you!